I'm here today to talk to you about AWS Platform Services and really how they can help accelerate your cloud journey. And at some point, the guys will figure out my size down there as well. Even better. That's great. So what are we going to cover this afternoon? So first of all, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges of moving faster. Okay, I'm going to then talk through some of the AWS Platform Services, how you can use them, and also how some of our existing customers are using those platform services. I'm going to also give you a demo of how you can actually get started with one of our platform services so you can just see how easy it is. And finally, I'm going to give you some next steps. Okay, so let's move on. By the way, guys, I still can't see my current slide, just so you know. So first of all, let's talk about the benefits of cloud computing. Well, actually, I hope by the end of today, you already know this. I mean, they're quite compelling from both a business and technology perspective. The agility they bring, the ability for you to be able to basically go and deploy things with no upfront investment, it's really very compelling. And I'm sure you've seen throughout today that it's very easy for you to deploy highly scalable, highly available, secure applications on demand with AWS in a matter of minutes. And you can do that through the AWS console. Well, you know what? That's great, but it starts to bring a bit of pressure to us because suddenly we've got to think about how do we move faster? Well, one way that we can approach this is automation. So we can think about how can we automate using third-party tools or perhaps Amazon-provided tools. Or maybe you think about writing your own tools using the APIs and SDKs that Amazon provides. But I'm just getting started. This is really quite daunting. Well, don't worry, there's a middle ground, okay? This is why Amazon also provides a range of platform services. And these are there to allow you to focus on deployment and management of your applications. You don't need to worry about managing the underlying infrastructure. You don't even need to worry about managing some of the underlying Amazon services that power these platform services. That's done for you as part of the platform service. Well, this sounds great. And ultimately, the benefit of these AWS platform services is predominantly around being able to help you get started fast. Okay? Fast to start, simple to use. The knock-on effect of this, of course, is that they can really help increase your productivity and increase the productivity of your developers and your business because you're no longer sitting around essentially trying to spin up infrastructure, okay? You're focusing on applications. Now, this would be fantastic, but you have to remember that, you know what? Your intention as a business is you want to grow. So we also make sure that these platform services grow with you. So you can start small, you can grow big, and we take care of this through the different platform services that we offer. Well, what are they? I mean, I think as you saw in Werner's keynote this morning, the list of different areas, let alone services that we provide, is huge. And it's increasing nearly every week, it feels like. So we've kind of split them into these 5 areas. So the first is big data and analytics. The second is enterprise application. Third, we have a focus on mobile application development, mobile services. And we have developer tools and productivity. And finally, we have the Internet of Things. Well, okay, so what are these in a bit more detail? And more importantly, how are other people using them? Let's start off with big data and analytics. I mean, if any of you were at the talk this morning from Craig, you will have heard about just how much data there is being produced today and how it's growing at an exponential rate. And realistically, many businesses can't keep up with that. They can't keep up with the storage of that data, let alone be able to do anything meaningful with it. Well, don't worry. We provide a range of big data and analytics services enable you to actually collect, ingest, process, and analyze that data. And I want to just touch on a few for you. The first one I want to talk about is Kinesis Firehose. Kinesis Firehose is a service that allows you to capture and ingest data at any scale. Okay? It can do this from a range of different sources. So you can capture data from fairly traditional log files. For instance, you might want to set up the Kinesis Firehose agent to be looking at a set of web logs or a set of application logs. You can then ingest that data into AWS. It will do it for you as part of the managed service. You might want to get clicks from mobile applications. You might be streaming in social media feeds. Firehose can help deal with all of these things for you. You simply set up a stream, define the source, and let it take care of the rest. And because it's fully managed, it means that you can ingest data from thousands of devices or locations simultaneously without data loss. Again, because it's a managed service, it automatically scales with you. Okay, so as you start to ingest more data from more sources, it will scale up. It will do all of the things required under the hood to make sure that it can continue to capture that data, up to gigabits per second. Okay? I've not had to do anything here apart from provision a Firehose service. Now, the really great thing for me about Firehose is the fact that it allows you to emit data into other AWS services. For example, you can emit data to Amazon S3, our storage service, or you can emit it to Amazon Redshift, our petabyte scale data warehouse service, or even into Elasticsearch, which we announced last week at the Chicago Summit. This allows you to start gathering data in near real time and being able to process it in near real time. Now, the natural kind of target for Firehose data to begin with is Amazon S3. And if you've been thinking about building out an enterprise data lake, then S3 is probably a good place to start. It is highly durable. It has no limits on the amount of data that you can store, and it is highly available. Not only that, it's also very secure. It comes with the ability for you to manage the encryption controls that are used around your data stored in S3. In addition, it has very granular access control policies that allow you to control who can access the data from where for what purpose. And by granular, I mean down to even object level. And it really is the epitome of pay for what you use as a service. I mean, S3 was introduced way back at the beginning of Amazon Web Services. It's one of the first services that we offered. And since then, it's been offering the ability to pay for storage per gigabyte per month based on what you actually store. No pre-allocation, no commitments. Now, once I've got my data in S3, I want to process it. So I can now hook into another part of the big data and analytics ecosystem, and that is Amazon EMR. So Amazon EMR is a fully managed big data processing service. Now, it has support for multiple different big data frameworks out of the box. I mean, we actually provide a number that you can just select from the console and deploy, including Apache Hadoop, Apache Spark, and Presto. But it's also customizable, so you can actually build your own frameworks into EMR. So EMR as a service will now do all of the orchestration around the compute and installing the required software to build your big data cluster. And all you need to worry about is bringing your data, which I can pull from S3 because it integrates natively with S3, and then bringing the logic around how I want to process that data. And again, as a service, it supports end-to-end encryption of data in transit and in rest, something which is incredibly useful. I'm not having to do very much here other than tick the box that says, encrypt my data with this key that I manage. Ultimately, though, these services are all about helping you turn data into real business insight in minutes, okay? Not days or weeks. Now, one of our customers who's actually been making use of platform services is a fast-growing startup in the US called Euclid. Now, they're actually, interestingly enough, helping very traditional brick-and-mortar companies understand their retail analytics, understand the foot traffic going through their stores. And they process tens of terabytes of data about foot traffic. And they do this using pretty much only AWS Platform Services. Now, they start by ingesting data with the AWS Elastic Beanstalk service. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Once the data's been ingested and stored into Amazon S3, some of it they will automatically load into the Amazon Redshift data warehouse. Some of it needs a little bit more massaging. So they'll take that unstructured data and they will then process it with Amazon EMR. Now, this is really where the smarts happen, okay? This is where they basically build their algorithms to analyze their data, okay? And then they will push that into Redshift as well and make it available to their end customers through their data access layer. Now, like I say, they are using pretty much all platform services. There's not an EC2 instance in sight for this customer. The next set of applications is enterprise applications on AWS. And these are really designed to help companies offload some of those more traditional tasks that actually take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort for enterprise IT. The first of them is Amazon Workspaces. Now, Amazon Workspaces provides you the ability to have desktops within minutes. Okay? And this is without you having to worry about the burden of managing traditional virtual desktop infrastructure. I mean, if anybody's had to build a VDI solution, I mean, it's incredibly compelling. It looks like it can really solve a lot of business problems, but the reality is it is hard to manage. The good thing about Workspaces is you deploy them within your AWS VPC. That means they're integrated in your network. You're now bringing your users closer to your data. Okay? They're not sat on machines out there somewhere and accessing over WANs. You're actually accessing machines that are sat inside virtual data centers. Again, it comes with a range of customer-managed encryption controls. So you can decide which encryption keys are used to encrypt these workspaces. And we support a range of different methods of accessing workspaces. So you can have mobile clients, you can have fat clients on PC and Mac, you can have thin clients, and you can have zero clients. So there's a range of different ways you can interact with workspaces. Now, to complement workspaces, we also have the Workspaces Application Manager. So this provides virtual application delivery. So I don't need to worry about having any software delivery infrastructure anymore. I simply provide virtual applications. Well, this has another great benefit, because when I want to update an application, well, it's updated for everybody. I'm no longer running unpatched apps. All of that headache about getting new versions of software out there is suddenly gone away. Now, the way that it works is that there's actually a catalog of applications made available to your users. Now, you decide what applications they get to see, and we offer a commercial marketplace of applications to get you started. We also provide a number of open source applications in there as well. But you decide which apps your users see. Maybe the app that you want to use isn't in the marketplace. Maybe you've already bought the licenses. Not a problem. You can actually also bring your own application into the Workspaces Application Manager, make it available to your end users. It will just appear in their catalog. The beauty of this, of course, is, especially if you use the marketplace, you're only going to pay for the applications that people actually use. So again, this is an incredibly useful service, because suddenly all of the work that I've been doing for years around desktop management suddenly becomes automated through a very simple service. Ultimately, though, the enterprise applications are really meant to be there to meet the usability, the performance, and reliability expectations of end users. Because let's face it, they can be very demanding. Whilst at the same time, we've got to ensure that we have good security and compliance to meet IT and compliance requirements within the business. The next set of services are the mobile services. And there's some really cool stuff happening in the mobile space. The mobile services are built on top of the AWS global platform, so they share all of the same tenets as the rest of our services about being highly available and highly reliable. One of the most fundamental mobile services, though, is Amazon Cognito. Amazon Cognito is essentially an identity service for mobile. Okay? Last week, we announced the inclusion of Amazon Cognito for identity. And this allows you to create and manage directories of users, up to hundreds of millions of users. So I'm not having to run my own identity store and worry about securing that. That's taken care of for me by using Cognito. Now, if you don't want to create your own user store, you may want to just use a social media login. That's okay. You can also have federated identities with Amazon Cognito. And no matter how you authenticate that identity, we will take care of making sure that it has an identity within Cognito. And this is for both authenticated and unauthenticated users. Because sometimes you don't want to authenticate a user, but you need to know uniquely who they are. Now, the other thing that Cognito can do for you is it can help synchronize profile data on your users. So, I mean, if you have multiple mobile devices, and many of us do today, if you're using an application, generally you want the same experience no matter which device you use. And Cognito helps you synchronize that data between those devices. What it can also do is help provide secure access into AWS services. The paradigm when you start developing mobile apps should be to think, how can I go serverless? How can I interact with data stores such as DynamoDB without having to go through a server? Well, if you're using our mobile SDKs and Cognito, you can do exactly that and provide fine-grained control to allow users on mobile devices to directly interact with data store on DynamoDB. For those services or for those applications that need a little bit extra, well, we have the API gateway. This is a fully managed service which allows developers to create, publish, maintain, monitor, and secure their APIs. Now, you can integrate into your own applications, which might be running on EC2 or any web application server of your choice. Or you can integrate with Lambda. Okay? API Gateway handles all of the processing for you. I mean, it can scale up to hundreds of thousands of concurrent API calls for you as a customer. And it deals with all of the traffic management, the authorization, and the access control. All of this is done for you in the service. You don't have to worry about any of it. You just focus on your application. This is what platform services are all about. Focus on your application. Now, the next service in the mobile space, which maybe mobile, actually I think Lambda is awesome. Lambda is a really good general all-purpose service, which is really redefining the way we think about architecture. Because essentially it now means that I don't have to focus on servers. I can run code without servers, and I'm only going to pay for the time that I consume. It was like a bit of a throwback to the 1960s here in time slicing, but the reality is that if I no longer have to manage servers, fantastic. It's a huge burden off my shoulders. Now, the beauty of using Lambda is that every single time you need to run a function, it's invoked for you automatically in the background. And it will automatically scale based on the number of events that are happening. So each time an event fires, it will run that code individually. You don't have to do anything here because this just happens in parallel for you. The beauty of Lambda as well is that you can integrate it to access all of your other AWS services, including services that you've deployed inside your VPC. Now, to give you an example of a customer who's been using mobile services, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation has been actually using the simple notification service. Now, they've actually been doing this to allow their subscribers to get breaking news alerts. Essentially, this is what happens. The end user goes and downloads a mobile application. When they download that application, it will automatically go to Cognito and get them an identity. Now, if they choose to log in and federate with maybe a social media feed, it will actually then associate that Cognito login with that social media feed and then synchronize data. If they don't, it's fine. They then subscribe to a number of different topics that they're interested in. Now, when they do that, what's actually happening in the background is they're subscribing to what we call SNS topics. Okay? Now, let's say there's a breaking news story. What happens is that one of the newsroom editors will go to their web application console, and then they will type in the breaking news update, and they will decide which topic it gets published to. They send the request to the SNS service. SNS is then tasked with, please go away and figure out which users have subscribed to this and send them a push notification message. And this could be across a range of different messaging platforms. I mean, out of the box, we support not just iOS and Android, but also Windows phones and a number of other devices. As an application developer, I don't need to worry about those anymore. I just worry about sending the message once to SNS, and SNS takes care of that for me. It also tracks delivery, so it knows which messages have been delivered and which ones haven't, at least to the messaging provider. And it can give that data back to the newsroom editors so they know how many people have seen that message. So, pretty interesting use case. And this is also really easy to get started with as well. Ultimately, though, all of these services in the mobile area are meant to be easy. And we actually provide a dedicated AWS mobile hub that can allow you to start leveraging all of these services. Next is DevOps. I mean, there's a lot of promise with DevOps. DevOps practices and principles, offer a lot of agility to organizations. But sometimes the traditional infrastructure that we have in place can hinder that. That's why AWS has started to provide a range of different services to help bring agility. The first of these is code commit. Code commit is quite simply a repository which is compatible with Git, but is securely hosted in the Amazon cloud. You can assign permissions through your AWS Identity and Access Management Framework to access these secure repositories without you actually having to do anything other than provision it. The next one is Code Pipeline. Code Pipeline is a continuous delivery service. I mean, this essentially allows you to have fast and reliable application updates. When you make a change to code, it will then run that code through a build, test, and potentially deployment process. And it will do that for every single update. But you actually get to define how this pipeline works. You get to define, essentially, what does my release process model look like? Okay? And you can either use built-in plugins that we provide as part of the service, which integrate with some fairly well-known third-party apps like Jenkins, or you can actually build your own if you wish. Once you've built your code and you've tested it, you want to deploy it. And that's where AWS Code Deploy comes in. And this allows you to automate the deployment of code to instances. These can be off-premise or on-premise. Code Deploy is an agent that you can actually deploy into servers in your data center today if you want to. However, we'd much prefer that you actually deploy them on EC2. It handles all of the complexity of application updates, which essentially helps you to reduce downtime. Why? Well, it's automated. It means that the human error is taken out of the equation here. The other great thing about Code Deploy is that it can actually help you scale as you scale. You can use it on 1 instance or 1,000. It doesn't care. The final service I'll touch on in the DevOps space is the CloudFormation service. This is really our infrastructure as code service. And this allows you to create and manage collections of related AWS resources. So for example, in the ABC situation, we had SNS and we had some EC2, okay? And there was probably an RDS database in there somewhere. I could have described that entire environment as essentially a JSON text file. And I could have then reliably deployed that as many times as I wanted. Now, because I've defined all of this as JSON text, I can now version control it. The same way that I version control code, I can version control my infrastructure, which can become incredibly compelling from a DevOps perspective. But ultimately, all of these services are meant to promote DevOps principles and practices and give you more agility, because we want you to be focusing on your applications, not running the underlying infrastructure. Then we have the IoT services. I mean, IoT is a huge growth area for us as business. I mean, if we think about the possibilities that we could achieve with IoT in a connected world, it's staggering. But as a technology to manage from an infrastructure perspective, it's hard. Well, don't worry. We provide a range of different services here which can help you. The first is the device SDK and authentication service. Essentially, we take care of allowing you to connect your devices into the IoT service. We also ensure that when devices exchange information, that they've been mutually authenticated against the IoT service. And we don't exchange data without proving the identity of those devices. Now, that communication happens via the IoT device gateway. It supports highly efficient MQTT and WebSockets protocol. And we support we support a pub-sub method of communication. And this service is scalable. It's scalable to billions of devices. You've not had to do anything here other than start using the service. There's no infrastructure for you to deploy or provision. Very simple to get started. And for all of those billions of devices that you've suddenly created and are using, well, don't worry, we have a registry. And the registry allows you to track each of those devices, provide them with a unique identity, and allow you to associate metadata with each one. Okay? So it could be, for example, an attribute of the device that you've actually deployed. Ultimately, what we're trying to achieve here with IoT is we're trying to bring it to you, to your businesses, to allow you to start thinking about the future, thinking about how you can develop new products that will run in the cloud. Now, one of the companies that's done that is Philips. Philips has actually made use of AWS as a platform to build up their Health Suite digital platform. And they focused on IoT and their connected devices and how they can take that data, bring it into the AWS cloud, process it, and make actionable advice and provide alerts to basically carers and to family members about people with health problems. It's an incredibly interesting use case, tying together big data and tying together IoT, all powered by the cloud. Now, this sounds pretty interesting, but how can I get started with this? Well, if you were with me earlier in track 2, I had a requirement from my marketing department. Guess what? They're back again. And this time, they've come to me with a different set of requirements. They've basically said to me, like, we'd like to deploy a micro-blogging application because we want to get some customer feedback and a bit of interaction. But it needs to be highly available and reliable and secure. And we're not quite sure how many people are going to come. So can you make sure it kind of just never falls over? And we needed it last week, and you're the only person that's going to work on it. Okay, this sounds vaguely familiar. So the good news is I already have an open source tool in mind. I'm going to actually make use of the Ghost microblogging platform, which is a Node.js project. I'm going to need something to deploy this onto. But you know what? I don't have the time to worry about deploying servers and installing software and making all of this highly available. I just want something to take care of that for me. Enter Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is simply the fastest way to deploy an application on AWS. You simply upload your application, and we take care of the orchestration of the underlying resources for you. We also take care of the load balancing, the scaling, the health monitoring of the environment. But it's an orchestration service. We still give you full control over the AWS resources that are actually powering your application. The other really cool thing with Elastic Beanstalk, which was announced last week, is that we now handle the platform updates for you. So guess what? If there is a security update for the Java runtime environment, we'll deploy that for you. Okay? You don't have to worry about that. You simply decide on the maintenance window where you'd like those to be deployed, okay? Or you decide when you want to do it yourself manually by saying apply now, and we'll take care of it. And it's not just Java that we support .NET, PHP, Node.js, Python, Ruby, Go, and even Docker containers, all within this single orchestration framework. It's pretty cool. So let's take a look at the architecture to meet our requirements for the marketing department. It looks pretty simple. Beanstalk and an S3 bucket. So I'm going to use the S3 bucket to actually store the static content. I think Alex talked about that in his first session today, how you can deliver static content, static websites directly out of S3. So I'm going to leverage that service. But there's a little bit more to Beanstalk than just that one big icon. So let's take a look under the hood. So what Beanstalk is actually going to do is it's actually going to deploy for me an Elastic Load Balancer. It's going to deploy a number of EC2 instances across multiple availability zones, and it's going to put them into an auto-scaling group, okay, to ensure that they are highly available, and as additional load comes, it will add additional capacity. It's also going to take care of deploying a back-end database layer for me, and it's going to do this using the RDS service. Okay, and the RDS will be deployed again in multiple availability zones and replicate data between the two nodes. Okay, so how do I actually get started with this? There's 4 steps, and they're all pretty easy. And we're just going to go through them now. The first is download. Well, download's pretty easy. I go to the Ghost website, and I download the 3.8 meg zip file, which contains the Node.js application. I simply extract that, then I need to make a couple of subtle changes. I want this to work more seamlessly with the Beanstalk environment. Also, to be honest, when it comes by default, it uses a SQLite database. Well, it's basically a file that sits on an instance. If I'm going to have multiple web servers, I need to have a central data store. So I'm going to swap it out with the relational database service running MySQL. Now, the changes I make are actually pretty simple. I simply say my client is now MySQL, and I provide the connection details. What you'll notice, though, is I'm not actually providing any connection details. I'm calling environment variables. That's because Beanstalk is actually managing all of this under the hood for me. So when I create the environment, all of those things will be defined, and Beanstalk will inject them into the environment when it is launched. Next, I need to configure some storage that is centralized. So I'm going to use Amazon S3. So I'm going to use a module for Ghost, which allows me to use an S3 bucket. I simply define my bucket name, the region it's located, so here in Singapore, and a static endpoint, which will be used for the content. The last thing that I need to do is I actually need to package this up. Sorry, not package it up. I need to define the endpoint that this will be deployed on. Now, I've pre-decided where my application is going to live, and I'm actually going to make use of the Elastic Beanstalk domain that we provide as part of the service. However, you could change this to anything you wanted to use. This could be your company domain. Okay, third step, package. Again, this is pretty easy. Basically, all I actually need to do here is create a zip file. Once I've created that zip file, I'm ready to deploy. Okay, let's head over and let's actually take a look at how to deploy the Elastic Beanstalk environment. So give me 1 second. Okay, so, so deploying with Beanstalk is pretty easy. I just create an application. The first thing that I actually need to do is I need to define what that actual application is, and I also need to give it a description. Now, this could be anything you want, but it should be something that's meaning for you. Next, I need to decide on the actual environment. So this is a web server, so I'm going to choose a web server environment. Then I need to decide on the platform. Now, there's a range of different languages I could choose from, but I've already decided that this is a Node.js-based application. I also need to decide on the environment type, whether this is a single instance for development purposes or load balanced for production usage. So I'm going to go load balanced. Okay. I now need to think about my application. So I'm just going to browse for that zip file. And what will happen is that when I go to deploy the Beanstalk environment, it will actually upload the application zip file to Amazon S3, and it will then use that to be deployed across multiple nodes. So next we need to actually set the environment name. We also need to specify a unique URL, and we have to check this is globally unique. Once we've picked a globally unique URL, we're ready to decide on additional resources. Remember, I need a database, so I'm going to select RDS database. Okay. Now I'm into configuring what does the underlying web server look like. So first thing I decide on, what is the size? I can pick from pretty much every AWS EC2 instance size, but I'm going to go for a T2 micro. I'm also going to choose an SSH key to use to access that. Again, we're giving you full control over the environment. You don't have to choose these options, completely up to you. We also allow you to configure how services such as the load balancer are being used, so whether or not I have to have cross-zone load balancing or not. Well, everything looks pretty good with the default, so I'm just going to go on to the next step now, and I'm going to set some tags. So when I define tags, tags will actually be propagated to the resources that are deployed by Beanstalk. This means that if I'm looking for a storage volume and I see a tag against it, I know which application it's been deployed for, so I don't accidentally delete it. You can also use these for cost allocation and recharge as well. Okay. Now I need to configure my database. So the first thing I need to decide is my database engine. So I'm going MySQL, but I could have chosen even Postgres for Ghost as a platform. Next, I need to decide on the engine version. Well, I'm actually okay with 5.6.2.7. I don't need to go 5.7 at the moment. And I'm going to change the instance class to a T2 micro again, staying in the free tier, but giving me great performance. Okay. Let's just quickly specify a username and a password. And these details will be propagated through to the Beanstalk framework when I deploy. Okay, and again, I want this to be highly available, so I'm going to select multiple availability zones. Okay, so I've now set my database configuration. The next thing I need to do is I need to define some permissions. Now, these permissions will define how Beanstalk is allowed to interact with other AWS services on my behalf and also orchestrate AWS services on my behalf. Because what's happening is it's doing all of that orchestration for me as part of the service. So I've now defined the permissions, and I'm nearly ready to deploy. So we just need to quickly look this over. So environment type is web server. It's load balancing and auto-scaling. It's going to use the Ghost deploy application. Tags are set. Database is correct. Okay, looks like I'm pretty much ready to go. So what will happen is we'll start launching this environment. Now, it will only take a few minutes to launch the environment, but as we go through, what you'll start to actually see is that different components will be deployed. We're managing the underlying orchestration of the EC2 instances, security groups, auto-scaling groups, alerts, back-end database, all of these things being deployed automatically by the Beanstalk environment for us. It's also monitoring the health. So eventually, when the application is ready, the health should change to OK. I'm done. My application is deployed and available online, and I can simply visit the URL that I defined earlier to go and see it. So it really, click, thank you. So it really is that easy to get started with Elastic Beanstalk. Just a matter of minutes to deploy an application. And once you're done, you can actually go and monitor the underlying infrastructure and see basically how things are getting on. What's the latency of my application? How many connections do I have? How much network bandwidth is being used? Now, Beanstalk isn't just for development and test usage. But if you make a mistake, you know what? You can change it. You can actually change the configuration of Beanstalk. Maybe you decide a different instance type is required. We will then take care of that for you under the hood. Now, we've also provided a set of walkthrough instructions. So if you want to try out deploying the Elastic Beanstalk environment, Ghost on Elastic Beanstalk, you can simply visit this bit.ly link, and we'll give you full instructions of how to do that. Like I say, it doesn't take any more than about 10 to 15 minutes to get started, and it's a great intro. But Beanstalk isn't just for deploying dev and test apps. It's also good for production apps. In fact, here in Singapore, SGX actually deployed one of their mobile applications on top of Beanstalk. I mean, they were looking for something that was quick to deploy and offered them a really fast time to market. And Beanstalk ticked all of the boxes. I mean, once deployed, it takes care of all of the scaling. They don't have to do anything. Deploy the application, and Beanstalk will then scale as traffic comes. The great thing for them was it decreased their time to market from 4 to 6 weeks to less than a day. And I think having seen the demo, you can understand why. Now, no matter where you go with your platform service uses on AWS, we've got getting started guides to help you. So maybe you want to go and build your own cloud-based desktop. Well, head over to the Workspaces documentation, and we've got guides on how to get started fast on Workspaces. Perhaps you want to develop a mobile app. Head to the Mobile Hub. Maybe Lambda looks interesting. I definitely advise you head over to Lambda and see how you can run code without servers. No matter which platform service you choose, though, remember, they're designed to be fast and simple to get started. They're meant to help increase your productivity and scale with you to make sure that they are never too big and never too small, or to make sure that you can actually accelerate your cloud journey. With that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.